Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Tarot Memoirs. This week we are talking about the moon. So the moon is a card I have a complicated relationship with, and I will talk more about that in just a moment. But first I just want to tell you, if you are new here, Tarot Memoirs is a series where I share with you some excerpts from my favorite tarot books about the card that we're looking at that week, as well as share with you a bunch of different images from cards from tarot decks in my collection showing this particular card, so we can look at sort of how each one shows the energy of that card. And at the end of the video, I like to share some personal stories or the ways that I feel like this card shows up for me day to day, and then usually at least one particular moment or memory I have where this card or this energy really showed up in my life. So that is where the memoirs part comes in. With that said, I'm going to jump right into some of my thoughts on this card in general. Before I dive into sort of the book itself, I'd like to say that I have a very positive and nurturing relationship with the moon. And the traditional depictions or descriptions of the moon used to be, or I used to feel like they were very much in conflict with my relationship with the moon. But the point of this card, and I think what you'll find when we dive into the excerpts, it is meant to talk about those things that are less clear. The sun is a very bright light that makes everything very visible, but the moon is a more obscure light. Not everything is as it seems in moonlight. That's really how the moon shows up and how I think this card was originally intended to be portrayed. So we're going to be talking about that aspect of it. But if you have a really positive relationship with the moon, you don't need to see the moon as a negative card when it comes up. It's not so much that it's negative as that it requires some looking at yourself and some investigation, and perhaps the reason that some of us are, like I call myself like a moon baby or a moon child, the fact that we can feel an affinity for the moon doesn't negate the fact that it has these properties of maybe some illusion and some things, you know, bubbling up from our shadow self and all that kind of stuff we're going to hear in these excerpts. So I just kind of wanted to address that because for a while it felt very disjointed for me until I realized that the two things weren't mutually exclusive and they could exist together. So with that said, I'm going to dive into my tarot books. So first I like to get into Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. I think I actually put a bookmark in. Oh good, I did. So a couple of things I highlighted here. First, the moon is the card of the imagination as it molds the energy of the star into shapes that the consciousness can comprehend. So I thought that was kind of well worded. I liked the way that that was said. Myths are always distorted. They can never really say what they want. They can only appeal to the things deep within the self. This is true. Myths and metaphor and things like that can be things that the moon can represent. The stuff where we have to dig a little deeper to get the real message or the truth beneath the story. Remember that the star and the sun gives off their own light, but the moon reflects the hidden light of the sun. The imagination distorts because it is reflecting inner experience to the outer mind. Another excerpt. Something about the moon excites fear and strangeness, just as the sun relaxes and consoles us. Now this is true. How often, I've got a puppy that just came in. Shayla just came in. Hi baby, you gonna come up? No, she's just gonna like nap at my feet. It is true that the moon makes us feel kind of strange sometimes. We feel more magical, or we feel more strange, or we feel more emotional. And that's going to come up in some of these excerpts, and I do think it's something worth being aware of. The dog and the wolf represent the animal self roused by the moon, just as a full moon can set both creatures howling all night long. And then later on, the crayfish half emerges from the water. Weight tells us, so Weight of the Rider-Waite Smith deck, Weight tells us it never comes completely onto land but always falls back again. The deepest terrors are the ones that never fully take shape. We feel something inside but we can never see just what it is. It's that like uneasy feeling of something bubbling up that we can't quite identify, and I think that was a really beautiful way of expressing it, and it gives me a new way to look at this sort of crayfish that comes up. The road leads, so the road between and then behind these two dogs. The road leads through two towers, suggesting a gateway into unknown areas. And it's the unknown of the moon that makes it so obscure and so frightening sometimes. The moon also suggests the power and mystery of women's fertility. And this is actually a good point, and I'm sorry guys if you don't want to hear this, but this is the way it is. Actually, I'm not sorry. You suck it up. Okay, moving on. Menstruation, the word menses relates to month and moon, is miraculous because menstruating women bleed copiously yet do not die. Fearing this power, men have created disturbing myths and taboos around menstruation, but power does not have to be destructive or even frightening. If respected, this lunar psychic awakening enriches life. In divinatory readings, the moon indicates an excitement of the unconscious. We begin to experience strange emotions, dreams, fears, even hallucinations. We find ourselves more intuitive, more psychic. Later on, like the high priestess, the moon indicates turning away from outer concerns and becoming introspective. It can indicate giving up some specific activity or simply a period of withdrawal. However, this is again later, I keep skipping from section to section. However, while the high priestess symbolizes quiet intuition and the moon is excited, stimulating images from the unconscious, the moon reversed signifies a disturbance. The person does not wish to turn away from the solar side and may try to fight off the moon by a great deal of activity, distraction. The moon, however, will not be denied, and the fears can get stronger the more we fight it. So I thought that was really interesting, this idea that you might be feeling this feeling, and that reverse, the moon is like when you're denying that feeling, you're trying to pretend it doesn't exist, you're trying to distract yourself from it, that sort of thing. Oh, yes. Next, let me put my bookmark back. Kitchen Table Tarot, Melissa Sinova. So her insights tend to be a little punchier, so I don't have usually as much highlighted, but it's good stuff, all of it. So she has an action phrase, and with the moon, her action phrase is, I am wary. And she says, this card is about intuition, but not the fun kind. I like how she puts that. Not the fun kind. It's about the feeling you get before you get into an accident. Before natural disasters, animals oftentimes behave erratically. That's this card. It's the same primal thing we share with the dog and the wolf. Something is coming and it isn't good. The way that the path seems illuminated is creepy. You can't see where it's going and you can't see well enough to make your own path. You have to trust someone else to make decisions for you. Later on, she says, why are we afraid? Because we don't know. We don't know. There's so much anxiety with uncertainty, which is kind of what I was saying before, that what makes us nervous about the moon, or the nervousness that's associated with the moon, is that unknowingness. Reversed, she mentions that letting fear completely overcome you and paralyze you is a sign of the shadow side of the moon, which I really liked that. Getting into Holistic Tarot by Benabel Wen. Did I put my bookmark back? Did I even have a bookmark? Well, I found my page, so that's good. I didn't highlight nearly as much in this one, but there's a lot of juicy stuff in here. So a reflection of the inner self is emerging. The moon represents the shadow of the self, the unconscious mind, and repressed weaknesses. Later, she says, compare key 2, the high priestess, represents personal mystery, while key 18, the moon, represents physical mystery. The high priestess suggests secrets that a person is withholding. The moon represents secrets of the natural world, the hidden condition of the seeker's situation that will reveal itself in time. And I don't think I have anything from the reversal. Oh yeah, I do, just very briefly. The seeker is in a state of confusion, is what she has as one of the reversals for this card. So, interesting. And still a little unclear, which is sort of the nature of the moon. It's kind of like it's hard to grab onto the meaning of this card, and often I will read it differently based on the context of the question, its position in a spread, or sort of what I'm getting energetically from the client. But let's look at some different images, as I like to do. So the moon, Rider-Waite-Smith. This is the Smith portion of this is Pamela Coleman Smith. This is the Centennial Edition. Love this version of the Rider-Waite-Smith. And just for comparison, because it's really fun to put these two side by side, I did this last week as well. I have the moon from the Crystal Unicorn Tarot. It's almost identical, except we have the presence here of, I believe, some selenite here. And then we, of course, have the unicorn in the moon as opposed to the people-y face in the moon. Same dog and wolf, same crayfish, same hidden path or barely illuminated path. Same stones or columns in the background suggesting the gateway. Love the coloring of this card. Plus it's just pretty. It's pretty. I like it. The moon on water from the Wildwood Tarot. That's what the backings look like. Mine is trimmed. We still get this idea of something that's not quite clear, and what I notice actually, and I sometimes see this is actually what's really cool about this card, I sometimes see it and sometimes I don't, but there's an egg in the water right here, or at least an egg-like shape, and I don't always see that, which is kind of cool. And then the idea is that we're trying to, I think, make our way over to where all of these animals are. You have like birds flying, you have some kind of creature, like a bull, I think. I'm really bad animals, I'm pretty sure that's a bull. over there in the distance. But definitely you get this idea of sort of mystery and illusion and things maybe not being as they seem. Like, is this really an egg, or is this just the way the moon is reflecting on the water, right? That's very cool. Yeah, I like that. The moon from the Mythic Tarot, I'm pretty sure that we are seeing, I was going to say Hecate with the Greyhounds, but now I'm not sure if it's Hecate or Caradwen. Pretty sure it's Hecate with the Greyhounds. I have to study this deck, and I will be studying this deck later this year. This deck will hopefully make more sense to me then. I'm hoping. I need to study up on my myths. The Sun and Moon Tarot. Love this image. I love the lighthouses, and I love the churning water here. We don't have a crayfish here, but we do have this Pisces symbol, or the two fish here leaping. Kind of interesting. And Shadowscapes. Definitely there's that idea of like sort of making your way through the woods with only so much light. There's definitely an idea here of intuition, and also we see that she's holding a mask. I don't know if you can see that in her hand, that she's taken off or that she's found. So there's definitely an air of mystery here for sure. The Moon in the Healing Light Tarot. Sorry, this one's glossy, so it reflects. We still get the crayfish peeking up, the moon. This one seems much waterier to me. It's like I can't even see where the path is supposed to be. Now, in this deck, what you want to pay attention to is where these circles overlap. This is called the Lemniscate. There's this little oval Vesica Pisces shape right here where these two circles overlap. That's supposed to be where you're supposed to bring your focus onto the card. And so it's the space between those two pillars. We can assume that that is a path, but it's really hard to see in this card. So it really highlights that obscurity. The Moon from the Mythic Fairy Tarot. This one's a little more symbolic. She's sitting on a stone that has the crayfish, and we see the wolf here next to her. There's a little less fear, but we can see here how, is she a part of the moon, or is it just that her hair is blending with the moon in the background? So there is that idea of, what am I seeing? Is she in the moon, or is that just the background? Kind of makes me think of those photos like the leaning people take with the leaning power, that's what I just said. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. You know where they look like they're holding it up? That's kind of what this makes me think of. This is more of the wildness of the moon in the tarot. I can do it. Tarot of the Hidden Realm. This fae, you can definitely see, is almost like she's avoiding wanting to go behind her to this path. She seems lost and afraid, at least to me. A little more wild, a little more primal energy here. Very interesting. The Moon in the Deviant Moon is, I think, a really powerful representation of the way that our minds can grab a hold of us and take us places where maybe we weren't meant to go. And this idea of the moon pulling our strings, so to speak, or that idea of imagination and lack of clarity actually causing confusion. That's kind of what I see here. Let's see. I adore this moon from the Prismavisions. It's just really beautiful to look at. In this case, we're trying to, it looks like, row a boat down a winding bit of water, a lake or a river. And we still see the dog and the wolf in the distance and the moon. The moonlight definitely changes the way the landscape looks. How deep is the water, or how shallow? Where are the pitfalls? It's kind of hard to see. The Moon from the Tarot of Dreams by Ciro Marchetti. This one's really interesting, especially this bright spot here in the center where there's bats flying at us. So I think that kind of highlights the potential for fear here. We still have the dog and the wolf. There still is a path or a river with a waterfall in the background that leads between these two sort of rocky outcrops. So you still get that sort of visual. Really beautiful. The Moon in the Spirit Keeper's Tarot by Benabel Wen is called the Necromancer, Gateway of Resurrection, which is really interesting to me. A lot to see here, a lot of mystery for sure. I haven't studied this deck either. I'm going to be studying this deck this month, February and March. If you're watching this while I'm putting these videos out in January 2019. And finally, the Moon from the Marseille. Definitely the same symbols are there. The dog, the wolf, the moon. Here, though, I see more of like this whole moon's influence sort of spreading out from it, which is kind of interesting. That is it for images. So let me put those away. So the thing is, trying to think of how to apply this to my daily life took a little bit more work than I was expecting. Mostly because I just love the moon. And I was like, oh, this will be a breeze. But it really wasn't, because the whole point of the moon is that it's obscurity. But what did occur to me is that from a shadow side, I am the worst for worst case scenario thinking. So what that means is, like, let's say I'm expecting Peggy home from let's say she went shopping or something, and I'm expecting her home in an hour, and like 2.5 hours go by. The very first thing I'm going to think is that she's in a ditch somewhere and can't reach me, and something horrible has happened, and these are sort of my fears and anxieties that bubble up. And to me, that's sort of the shadow side of the moon. When we let our fears or anxieties or our worries or our imagination of what could be, like kind of the worst case, when something's unclear and your mind immediately goes to the worst case, to me that's sort of one of the ways that the moon can show up day to day. It's like, oh, like you just think the worst. Somebody's irritated with you and you think the worst right away. So in the light side, I feel like the moon shows up when I kind of face that or acknowledge that tendency to think the worst possible thing, and then kind of check myself and face that fear and kind of step through it and talk myself down and figure out, like, give myself space to let my eyes adjust to the dim light, if that makes sense. So there's something unknown, and when we step into a dark room, at first you can't see anything. It's like you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And then as your eyes start to adjust, shapes start to take form. And if you're just patient and you just face the fear of the unknown for a moment, wait, don't make any sudden movements, and let your eyes adjust and let the shapes take form, suddenly it's all a lot less scary. And suddenly you can actually make your way forward. And I think in life, when we're hit with these moments where our gut is like, something's not right, we can't see something, there's something that's unknown, if you can kind of face the fear of the unknown and let your intuitive, maybe your third eye, it's a good way to put it, your intuitive eye or your third eye adjust to this dim light, you can gather more information before making a decision. And sometimes that's what we need to do when we're in that situation where it's just not clear. The way isn't clear. We're not really sure what that niggling feeling is. That's kind of how I see it in a light way, is when we really take that step back and we navigate ourselves. In a big way, I wanted to talk about, let's see, oh yes. So facing fear and letting eyes adjust. Becoming a parent. So I became a step parent to teenage, preteen-ish boys. I was petrified. I had no idea what I was doing. I came from pretty toxic upbringing. I definitely didn't want to pass that on, so I had a lot of fear going into that situation. And I think I'm proud of myself for letting the unknowns be unknowns, leaning into what I could trust, which was Peggy and her experience with the boys. She'd raised them till that point without any additional help. And so trusting and leaning into what I could trust, the solid ground around me, and feeling my way forward from a place of knowing I didn't know the answer, knowing I didn't know the way to do it. And so again, kind of, here's the dog and the wolf, and they're kind of shouting or howling their fear. That's sort of the representation of fear in that card, I think, in some ways. And I walked past them anyways and said, I can do this, and I'm going to make mistakes, and it's okay, and I'm going to face my fear, and I'm going to let my eyes adjust, my third eye adjust, and I'm going to feel my way forward and figure out as I go along what I'm doing. And it's kind of an obscure reference, but it's an obscure card. And I just feel like that was a time when I kind of faced some fear, especially in an area where I didn't know anything. Like, I had no positive examples to look to for parenting in my immediate circle at that point. Like, I don't know if that's quite fair to say, but at least my own personal experience hadn't been positive. And that was, of course, where my mind goes when thinking about parenting. So really being willing to step into the unknown in that way is something that I feel like was where the light side of the moon showed up for me in my life. I would really love to hear how the moon shows up for you in your life, in small ways or in bigger ways. If you want to share that, you're welcome to share it in the comments down below, or you can join us in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group and share some thoughts there. Another way that you can engage with this content is I will share with you a few journal prompts from Andy Matzner's book, Journaling the Tarot. If you want to do some personal writing and kind of dive into maybe where the moon shows up for you, these might help get you started. So I'm going to give you those now. The first journal prompt is, what do you fear? The second journal prompt is, what should you fear? Then we have, who were you before you were socially conditioned? About what must you be vigilant? And finally, how would you describe your shadow sides? So there's a whole lot there to chew on. If you want to do one or two or all of them in your personal journal work, I'm more than happy to encourage you to do that, because I think writing is really powerful and helps you to get closer to your understanding of the cards and how they show up for you in your life, which I think deepens your knowledge and your understanding of them. With that said, if you liked this video, please remember to click the little thumbs up button down below. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe so that you don't miss my future videos. And if you want to click the little bell, you might get a notification when I go live. I sometimes do free readings here on this channel, or just general chit chats and things like that, Q&As. So definitely click that if you want to get notified. YouTube usually notifies you eventually that I'm live, so it's worth a try. And you'll also get notifications when my new videos go up, usually on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, often more because I do this a lot. But until next time, you guys, I hope you have a really great day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you all again very soon.